Colleagues and friends, welcome to the HACER Latina Empower Her Summit afternoon business sessions. We are particularly thrilled to recognize a virtual audience member joining us from Chicago, representing Coca-Cola, Ana Castillo. Thank you for tuning in. We see you and we're glad you are here. We are also grateful to today's CEO Roundtable sponsor, Comcast NBC Universal Telemundo. Now, join me in welcoming HACER's Vice President of Strategic Engagement and Initiatives, Jai Vargas.
Welcome back. How was that lunch, everyone? Good. Your bellies are full. It was delicious. I really hope that you were able to capture what our incredible Giselle was sharing during that lunch today. It was so important to be able to see how Latinas are bringing their true heritage to positions of power. The fact that she talked about being in a room full of 27 different country presidents, right, when it came to Walmart leaders, was something that I'm so proud of. Seeing a woman that carries herself like that in rooms across the world, holding conversations, is something that I aspired to. So Giselle, thank you so much for your leadership. I also love the conversation that we've been having around creating your lasting legacy, right? Someone asked this of a number of our participants here, and what is your legacy going to be? And I love the fact that Giselle mentioned she wants to be known for leading Latinas and Latinos to and through opportunities, making sure that they not only see it's possible, but helping them get there, right? It's one thing to be able to say, I'm an ally, right? But another thing to be able to say, what is it that you need and want? I'm going to find an opportunity for you, make that call, and place you there, right? I'm going to coach you through it. It's possible. And so I love that. As some of you know, I am the LinkedIn networking ninja. And so I'm always connecting and strategizing, and it's really all about people for me. I hope that you're taking this opportunity to be able to connect with people like Giselle on LinkedIn. So make sure that you open up your LinkedIn app right now, or whenever, but right now, and connect with Giselle. Make sure that you connect with Sid as well, right? This is the opportunity. We have been a little rusty, right, because we've been behind the screen for 2 years, and now we're sort of getting out of our comfort zone back into the swing of things. But make sure that you open up your connections, right? Because at any point in time in your career, you're going to need the person that's sitting next to you, or they may need you to make a call for themselves or perhaps their daughter. And so this intimate conversation that we've been having is really only made possible because of our sponsors. So thank you all so much. Number one, for supporting, for being here, for asking your managers and your organizations to send you here, right? It's so important to be able to articulate why you need to be in this room. And hopefully you'll be able to do that so that next year you can join us in Arizona, right? Later this afternoon, we're going to be hosting a conversation that I'll be moderating called Creating Your Lasting Legacy with some really accomplished women. You're going to learn so much of what they've built over their 30-year careers and what they continue to do so. After that, we're actually going to be hosting our signature Latina Empower Summit CEO Roundtable with our very own Nina Vaca. Where's my Nina? Is Nina here? Maybe she stepped out really quickly. Nina Vaca is somebody that you also need to add immediately on LinkedIn if you haven't. And also on Facebook. She is incredible. She is like the Ecuadorian superwoman. She does these triathlons, and she's got this beautiful, incredible company that she's built from the ground up with her brother, and she's totally inspiring. Joining her on that stage is going to be Lorraine Harrington. Lorraine and I actually met last week because she hosted her annual summit, Catalyst for Women was this past Thursday in New York City. If you've never been to Catalyst for Women, look up that website, add them on Instagram, and make sure that you connect with Lorraine on LinkedIn. Any statistic that you could possibly need about women, women of color in the workplace, and men as allies, they have all of that research. And so make sure that you have that. But next, our first afternoon session is called Strategic Positioning for Future Board Opportunities. As you may have seen in one of the slides that we've been showing before, Latinas only make up 1% of those Fortune 500 board seats, just 1%. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, my God, how did Giselle make it, right? It's so important to start creating that for yourself. The path to board service requires skills, experience, connections. And something that many people don't pay attention to is that it actually requires a very intentional strategy. Our presenter will take you step by step through a proven strategy for finding the right connections, sponsors, relationships with intent, right? No es, si Dios quiere, we're gonna end up on a corporate board. Bueno, sí, si Dios quiere. But you also have to be like, hey, Marta, I need you to put in my name. I need you to be my sponsor because you have the access, the influence, and the impact in that organization. And they listen to you when you call, right? And so my next presenter for this session needs no introduction. So I'd love to welcome back to the stage our president and CEO, Sid Wilson.
All right. Give it up for Jai Vargas. Thank you so much, Jai. All right. So before I begin my slide presentation, just some background is that, you know, we always go to gatherings and we hear all about serving on boards, but few actually talk about, like, what are some strategies that you can think about as you can make your plans? Because for some of you, this is not intended to be a strategy on how to get on a board tomorrow. This is a strategy of how to think about that trajectory that will eventually be able to increase that visibility to help you get noticed for not just corporate boards, because even though the end result for many of these will help you get on corporate boards, but some of this is through getting on prominent nonprofit boards because of the fact that that it does begin to experience that network and what does that mean. But it also means to understand what are some misconceptions that we want to, to break an understanding. And we know that hearing the comments this morning and certainly the comments last night and hearing Giselle and many other leaders, you'll see some common denominators as you think about what is your strategy, whether it's on the corporate side or whether it's getting on prominent nonprofit boards. So with that, let's get started. Okay. So as we get to my first, thank you. There we go. All right, so that's me, everybody. All right, so let's start with something that we hear a lot, qualifications versus connections. And just some background is that I've been serving on boards now for almost 17 years. And in those 17 years, corporate as also prominent nonprofit boards. I serve on right now I serve on a private company board. I've served on other boards in the past. I just got on the Junior Achievement USA Board of Directors recently, and many others. But the one common denominator is qualifications versus connections. It's your qualifications that get you that job or promotion. They think about your resume and what you've done and all your accomplishments. But it's your connections and your credibility that gets you that prominent board seat. And this is so important because when we think about, what companies are looking for, while they hear these things of saying, hey, these are your skill sets, the reality is a lot of board seats are chosen from your connections and credibility, which goes into sponsorship. So nonprofit board service, when planned strategically, can strengthen your external professional credibility. And this session is to talk about that overall strategy on nonprofit boards as part of your overall professional development and long-term as you start thinking about your future board plans. So what are the benefits of serving on strategically for nonprofit boards? And before I even go through these slides, one thing I want to also share is that this is not a conversation about, should I join that board that I'm passionate about? Of course you should join any board that you're passionate about. But what we're talking about here is if you're thinking strategically of how to build that network that could eventually help you get noticed for future boards, then this is a strategic conversation. So the benefits of this is that it magnifies your professional development with the possibility of employers sponsoring your board service. Because here's one thing that often we don't do enough. Tell our employer that we just joined this nonprofit board because one, they may sponsor you, and two, they may already have a relationship with that nonprofit organization that may help magnify your board service. It expands and increases your external and internal networks, especially with higher ranking leaders within your company because of the fact that you're serving on these nonprofit boards. And it exposes you to other nonprofit board directors, and this is key, who also serve on other boards and some corporate and some nonprofit. I know when I got on my first major nonprofit board about 17, 18 years ago, I remember sitting next to someone that was just a very accomplished person. That person got asked to serve on their fourth major board, and as we hear this is that you get on your first, your second, third, fourth, fifth, but eventually you're like, okay, I've done enough. But Sid Wilson, who I serve on together on this board, I think he would be great for that particular board, and that's how I got tapped for some of those boards. And actually, that's how I got tapped on my first corporate board. And so those are key things. And they can lead to those recommendations for fewer higher profit, nonprofit board appointments, civic appointments, even promotions within your company because you become almost like an ambassador for your company when you are serving on these nonprofit boards. So how strategically can nonprofits support your career? One is that, as I shared, your employer may sponsor you. Employers love when you serve on nonprofit boards because it makes you grounded, it makes you more likely to be retained at your employer, so they like when you're serving on nonprofit boards. It promotes you as an ambassador of the company. It also, and as you move up the ladder, here's what's key. As you move up the ladder, your company may also want you to move up a parallel nonprofit strategy. So you might be starting with, let's say, I'll take an example like the Boys and Girls Club or Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Urban League, all these ones that have chapters in those cities, but as you're rising up, they may say, hey, we may want you to be on the state board. We may want to sponsor you to be on the national board. And so as you're rising up into these high-ranking roles, the same thing that you want to have that same parallel strategy. And as you move, and as I showed at the very bottom, companies recognize that their employee ambassadors on nonprofit boards strengthen retention and longevity at the company. So there's a lot of great benefits to this strategy. So, questions to ask when planning strategically for that board service. And this is something that everybody should do. One is, who else is on that board? Because remember, you having to get to know who are your fellow board directors is so key because that is part of that network that you're growing by getting to know your fellow board directors. It is so key. I make it a point to get to know every single board director. Can we have a call? Can we have coffee? If you're out of town, I'll call you when I fly in because I want to get to know that because these are the directors that will eventually, as they begin to get opportunities, they begin to recommend you as well. Is there a history of that nonprofit attracting highly credible board directors? As I shared, I just got on the board of directors of Junior Achievement USA. You can imagine the first thing I did when they asked me to serve on there, I said, who else is on that board? And when I saw who was on that board, I said, wow. I said, that's a board. I'm on the board of directors of Latino Justice Pearl Deaf, which has like 7 general counsels on their board. And I say, my goodness, these are some incredible, amazing board directors who are just doing all these great things. Is there a vetting process to get onto that board? If you are serving or planning to serve on multiple boards, because many of us get to serve on multiple boards, but are the missions diverse from each other? Because you don't necessarily want to be serving on like 2, 3, 4 boards, all doing the same mission-driven work. Are the demographics diverse? And are your board committee assignments different? So if you're on the finance committee on one, maybe you may want to be on the personnel committee on another. Maybe you want to be on the audit committee for another. All these things so that way it helps to enhance your experience serving on these nonprofit boards. So this slide I love sharing this slide because it actually surprises a lot of people. Nonprofits with a history of producing future corporate board candidates. And I want to, when you look at these ones, I'm going to put at the very top, museum boards. If you go into any city, where's Lourdes Morla? I know she's here somewhere. I know that, because Lourdes knows Orlando. I mean, if there's an Orlando Museum of Art, if there is, there is. Look at that, good guess. I can guarantee you that if you go to their board of directors and you see who are on that board, I can almost guarantee that at least 5, maybe 10% are also serving on prominent boards elsewhere, even possibly corporate boards. Foundation boards, which are also very popular in terms of candidates that will go on later on to serve on boards. Health-related boards, hospital boards. This is another one. Again, if there's an Orlando General Hospital, or if there is a Memphis, Tennessee General Hospital, if there is, you look at that board and you start seeing the common denominators, that you are seeing these prominent leaders that are serving on boards who likely also serve on either a corporate board or other major prominent boards. College boards is important, but I put especially private college boards. Because as you know, public college boards, there is a process to get appointed, and sometimes depending on the state that you live in, there's an appointment process. But private college boards often operate like a non-for-profit. And so you will see usually some very prominent leaders serving on private college boards. Human service boards, any prominent organization that does human services and is very involved, those also are very prominent. And I put here well-funded, and I want to underline the word well-funded. Well-funded national nonprofits that promote a widely accepted cause, whatever that cause might be. Nature conservation, education, social reform, humanitarian aid, religious-based charities, diversity and inclusion. These kinds of organizations that are well-established and well-funded do have a history of producing nonprofit directors who may eventually go on to serve on a corporate board. So those are just some key things as you start thinking about where you are. But then some of you are going to say, well, how do I think about these museum, foundation, prominent health-related boards? So that's where I got to get to the money. And so these major institutions often have a give-get. And according to Board Assist, it's somewhere about $5,000 to $10,000 per year that they are looking for, because that's something called a give-get. Give meaning you're donating, get meaning that you're fundraising on behalf of that nonprofit. And so but what's really key is that what I find is that, again, when you look at some of these other give-gets for like many museums, hospitals, and these high-profile nonprofits, they could be as high as 25, can be 100,000. I think the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art is like 250,000, some astronomical number. But here is the key, because you're like, how can I make that work? Well, you may be eligible to leverage your employer to have an in-kind donation towards your give-get, or know your give-get potential and match it with possible nonprofit boards where you can meet that. And sometimes that may involve thinking whether does your employer have matching gifts. There are many of you where your companies will say, if you donate $1, I'll donate $1. But also there are some where the relationship may already be in place that may allow you to consider serving on those boards. So what should you do before you get on your on your nonprofit board or the one that you're targeting? One is know the process of getting nominated to the board. Identify those directors who you may have a connection with, because they may be the ones that may help nominate you to serve on that board. Find a mutual connection who can help you introduce you to that board director if you don't have anyone that can help you get noticed for that nonprofit board. Have you a get strategy in place before you begin that journey? Find out first. Because if they tell you, hey, we're expecting you to either give or get $5,000 per year, now you have an idea of like, what is that strategy? Can your company sponsor you? Can there be a matching gift option that can help you get to that? But know that before you begin that journey. And if the nonprofit has an existing relationship with your company, check to see if your company was willing to recommend you to the board. Because think about that. If your company says, hey, we recommend that our team member be considered for that board, what you just told that nonprofit is that as you join, guess who else joins? Your company. And that is a way to help you to get into these roles. And if your company foundation has a matching gift program, use it to magnify. I've actually seen one-to-one matching gifts. I've also seen examples where it's double matching, where if you donate and you volunteer and you do both, some companies, so check with your employer, check with your foundation, they may double match you. So it's a 2-for-1 match to help you get to that, to that give-get strategy. And so then what should you do after you get onto that nonprofit board? Again, know your board service outcome. Know what it takes to get noticed by your fellow board directors, because many of them are going to be getting to know you and eventually being able to refer you. And get to know your fellow board directors personally, especially those that serve on corporate boards. Because again, I love sitting next to someone that's on a corporate board, because I'm like, hey, let's be good friends, and let me know when you get asked to serve on your 5th or 6th board, because I know you're going to say no. Because here's a funny statistic. The hardest part, I love what Giselle said earlier, is like getting on that first board was that big hurdle. But once you got on that first one, here's the statistic, and this actually comes from, I think, NASD, is that it takes about 2 years to get on your second board. But then it takes like a year to get on your third, and then your fourth, because one, guess what's happened? You've been pre-vetted, and if you're good enough for this board, you're good enough for that board too. So you're going to get asked to serve on that 3rd, 4th, 5th, and eventually you're going to say, I can't do this, but Lourdes Mola, her and I know each other for many years. I think she would be great for this board, so I'm going to refer and recommend it. What did I just do? I just sponsored and I just shared my credibility to help lift up others to get on these boards. So that's why these are so important to know that strategy. And so, in conclusion, by planning for your nonprofit board service strategy, you can simultaneously support the nonprofit, because remember, these are nonprofits that have a very important community and charitable cause, while strengthening your external network credibility. And over time, you strengthen your credibility, which could yield greater opportunities for higher profile nonprofit boards, an advisory board, or a corporate board. And here's an equation that I think is so important to think about, is that when you think about the fact that I shared about credibility, what is credibility? Credibility is achievement multiplied by time, multiplied, and I leave this last one, by visibility. Because if you think about it, you can be an achieving leader, and over time you can have all these benefits, but if it's not being seen, and that's how we talked about earlier today, about making sure that it's not just your work speaking for yourself, but also you speaking for your work, that lends to that credibility, and that credibility builds that network, and that network leads to those referrals to serve on these boards. So remember that it's your connections and credibility, not just your qualifications, that will get you a board seat on a high-profile nonprofit board or even a future board. And I can say that that's exactly how it happens with so many. That's how it happened with me. I got on my first board when I was just 36 years of age. And within 2 years, same thing. The second one came, and then the third one came, and then these very prominent nonprofits ones came. So those are just some of the key things that I wanted to share, because I think that by understanding how to leverage your own employers and thinking about your strategy, then we can all become the future Minnesotas, the future Giselle Ruizes, the future leaders, many that are just doing great things of not only how do we continue to rise up, but remember how do we remember where we come from and continue to sponsor and support. But this is some of the key things as you think about nonprofit board service, because this is a journey. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen over time, but it's that strategy. So with that, I think I got a few minutes for Q&A. So let me open up for if there's 80 questions about strategic board service, strategic nonprofit service. Yes.
Sure. Oh, hey Sid, it's Celeste Carrasco with AT&T. One of the things that you were covering, I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity, or perhaps try to provide a little bit of clarity, is when you do apply to be on a board, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit. For example, my company requires us to go through a board review application, so that's another reason for informing your company that you are indeed being considered, because there may be some conflict of interest that they may want to know about, or they will flag for you. Most of the time they approve it, but they will do it by after educating you as to what some of the things that you may or may not do.
No, thank you, Celeste. And we know that for those of you that are in the financial services industry, you're actually required to disclose if you are being considered for a non-for-profit board, especially if you're a licensed representative. And so, but while being required is very key, the other thing is also, it's like there's a disclosure part, and then there's how do you be strategic about letting your employer know and asking, can you support me on this nonprofit board? Because one of the great things about it is that if you are considered ambassadorial for your company, now it's actually part of what you're doing in terms of your normal work. So it's no longer just extracurricular activity. This is part of the important work that you're doing internally and externally. But thank you, Celeste. Great question, or great statement. Thank you. Any other questions? I can barely see, so unfortunately, I can't tell if I see it like this.
I do have a. Am I good? Here we go.
Yes.
I do have a question from our virtual audience.
Yes.
What are your expectations from management of the nonprofits where you've served as a board member? One of the most important things that when you're serving, not only on a corporate board, but a nonprofit board, is CEO succession. One of the most important things that a board director does is not only think about the strength of the organization, but also the future. And over the years, I have been on probably 6 CEO search committees over time, and going through that process. And that's one of the very key important things that comes with being on a board. But the other is also setting the tone. We always talk about the importance of setting the tone at the top and creating that culture that we need to do, whether it's a culture of inclusion, a culture of opportunity, and how do we make sure that we're also being effective to, whether it's the mission of the nonprofit or meeting the goals if you're on a corporate board. So those are just some key things that are very important. So it's been great. And as you think about it, because I know that many of you, some of you may be on local boards, maybe on regional boards, some of you may be on even some national boards. But the key thing is always making sure that not only are you present, you don't want to be a letterhead board director where you're just there in name only. You want to be there participating. You want to find a way to become a committee chair. You may want to see how can I contribute to the best of our ability. Because as you get noticed by your fellow directors, guess what happens? Then as they start serving elsewhere or they can't, they start noticing you. And as you start getting noticed, that network begins to expand. Great question. All right, let's see, I think I got time for one more.
Let's see, I'm not sure if I see, and forgive me, because I can barely see as well.
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
The virtual audience. We heard Myrna Soto talk about making her intention known to recruiters. What advice would you give to women who aren't as confident in asking for what they want?
When, and I find like I feel like I have an understanding as an Afro-Latino, where I may be the only one in the room. I mean, there's one board that I serve on, I'm the only person of color in that entire room. And I'll never forget when I went to my first board meeting, and I said, mi nombre es Sid Wilson, soy dominicano de pura cepa, and if you don't know what I just said, you pull out your own Google search, and your job is to translate. Because I wanted them to understand that I did not come here to assimilate. I came here because I want all of you to acculturate to us, because we're the present and the future. And so, thank you. So it's so important because there's so many times where we're going to be in these boards where we may be one of either a few people of color, maybe a few women of color. You may be the only one in the room. But it's just so important to recognize, and I love what George Herrera said earlier this morning, just about making sure to be present. Because one thing that I share is that, we have to remember that they know that we are Latino. They know we're Afro-Latino. So when the microphone comes to us, we cannot yield and just pass it on to somebody else. When it's there, we have to be able to speak up. And every single board that I serve on, I let them know who I am. In New Jersey, I disrupted the whole state when I got on the state board, the New Jersey Council of County Colleges, and I told them, I'm going to talk about the DREAM Act every single meeting until it passes. And I did it till they got so sick and tired of me talking about it that they finally just said, let's just pass it on this legislation. And finally, before I became CEO for HACER, we got the New Jersey DREAM Act passed so that no student in New Jersey can ever worry about going to college and having to pay out-of-state tuition. So, but if there's courage, let's build those courage muscles, and I think that together we can all make that difference. And find those allies, find those leaders that can give you that courage, because that's what I did. All right, so my time is up. So again, thank you. I hope this was helpful for all of you as you start thinking about your nonprofit strategy and maybe long term as you think about future board strategies. So with that, thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Thank you. On to our next session.